thousands of Kenyans face job losses over the expiry of a trade agreement between the US and the African nations. We have an agreement that is known as the African Growth and Opportunity Act that was signed in 2000 under the US president then, who was Bill Clinton. This agreement was supposed to go for 15 years from 2000. And it was supposed to help African nations, African countries, export their products to the US market without paying any tariffs. So it was free, duty-free. You export jeans, we export nuts. Here in Kenya, we export nuts, we export textile, we export apparel. So we're actually exporting jeans, as I'm going to show you. And it's interesting because we import jeans from China. Yet we have companies here in the export processing zone that are exporting jeans and some of these clothing items to the US market. As a result of this agreement, these African countries, including Kenya, which is among the list, we have Lesotho, we have Madagascar, Botswana, Chad, South Africa, Ethiopia, went ahead and set up companies that have created jobs in various countries. This agreement is going to expire today, that is on 30th September 2025, and we don't have a way forward. It was initially launched in 2000. It almost expired in 2015, since it was supposed to go for 15 years. Then we had the president then, who was the former president Barack Obama, signed a 10-year extension. So it moved from 2000 to 2015 to 2025, and the 10 years have lapsed. We don't know what's next. We don't know what's next, considering the fact that the current administration that is in the US is supporting protectionist policies. In that, we have tariffs that were introduced this year that are applying to these other countries, to China and Vietnam, Brazil, considering the fact that we are not paying taxes on some of these items. But what's interesting is that we've had talks. African governments have had talks with the US government to extend this treaty for the next 16 years, in that we should expect this treaty to expire in 2041, but the motion was not agreed upon by the Congress. So what's next? Now let's look at the impact that this is going to have, especially in the Kenyan market. Think about South Africa, think about these other countries. So first, let me just show you a number, a statistic here. If this deal expires, which of course is going to expire today, and we don't have a way forward, then these items that we export to the US market, we should expect a 30% increment in terms of how much we are going to be charged exporting to their country. Currently, it's zero because it's duty-free. We don't pay any taxes exporting these items. But if this goes ahead, that is from first, and there's no agreement that has been reached, expect 30%, which is a cost that trickles down to the companies, to the manufacturing companies that export these items. So let me just show you this number. We have Lesotho that is going to lose 6% of its total exports. We have a country like Madagascar that is going to lose 3% of the total exports from their country. We have Botswana that is 2%. We have Chad, which is 2%. We have countries like South Africa that export citrus fruits. They export apples, they export oranges. You've probably seen them in the African market. Now think about the impact that it's going to have on these items in the US market. Like I said, the first impact is that there's going to be job losses. In fact, here in Kenya, we have a company that has been exporting jeans to the US market, the US retail market, and last week they laid off 1,000 workers. And that's just 10% of the workers that work in that company. So think about that. We have Kenyans who've already lost their jobs. There's another statistic in that last year, in 2024, we had over 40 companies here in Kenya that employed over 66,000 employees. Now think about that. Think about the cost, the higher cost of exporting items to the US market. Now they're not going to have that competitive advantage. For example, if an apple was going for, 10 shillings, it's now going to cost 3 shillings more, or even more than, not 3 shillings, 30% more. and how it's going to take away the competitive advantage it has in the US market now that they have to compete with other countries that are also paying these taxes. So if the cost goes up, then the company makes less profits. If their products, if the textile items, the products that they're exporting will not become competitive, then the US consumer will not choose this item that comes from the US, from the Kenyan market, from the African market, from the sub-Saharan market. They have to find alternatives. So as a result, there'll be massive job losses. And also don't just think about the direct losses. Think about the indirect jobs that are going to be lost. Think about that company that supplies machinery to these companies that produce textile that is exported abroad. Think about these companies that supply certain items to this company that is producing these jeans. And also think about Jane, who works in this textile company, Jane who has lost her job. Here in Africa, we say that if you lose an income, it's not only going to affect you, but it's also going to affect the village. It's going to affect the society, because if Jane loses her job, Jane loses her source of income, she's now jobless. She has a sister that she pays school fees for. She has children that she supports. She also supports her parents who are probably sick, and the burden is on her. So think about that chain reaction. And of course, we don't have social programs here in Africa, in most part of Africa, if you would agree with me. On a larger scale, on the bigger scale, think about these businesses, these 40 companies. Actually, there are more than 40 companies that have taken loans from banks. What about the loan industry in case they are unable to pay these debts, which then affects the performance of the bank? And if this company closes down, assuming that it's not in the export processing zone, so it doesn't pay, this company doesn't pay taxes, assuming that this company was paying taxes here in Kenya, then it's also a loss to the government, which is a source of revenue. So that's the bigger picture. To be honest, this agreement had a positive impact on African economies. But it's about time that we have to rethink, we have to re-strategize. Because what worked in the 2000s, what worked in 2015 cannot work now. Considering the fact that the current administration, the current US administration is thinking about America first. Why should the US carry the burdens of other countries? Why should the US continue giving foreign aid to other countries? What do they get in return? So you can see it's about them, and it makes sense. They have to look after themselves. If this treaty is not extended, then there's definitely going to be a shock in the economy, and not just the Kenyan economy, but the economies of these other countries. So as Africa, we have to rethink. We have to identify new markets. Of course, this is going to take time. We have to adjust. We have to go with the market this time round. What do you think Africa should do to make themselves immune to such a situation?